Gentlemen, today we're going to be revisiting Lizzie Borden and answering a few questions as well as a few assertions that have come up since my video here on Big Pretty Man. Hi, and welcome back to Big Pretty Man, a channel for the extra-large man who wants to live his life large and in charge. I'm your host, Timothy Big Pretty Crowe, a wardrobe and lifestyle consultant for the extra-large man. Okay, folks, like I said in the intro, we're going to be revisiting one of my prior videos. It's the first time I've had to do this. And that was, of course, my famous video on Lizzie Borden, wherein I gave my theory as to how I believe she done it, and also that I did feel that she was guilty of the crime. And I went into great detail into that because I have studied this case for over 40 years. So, and the thing is I got such a huge response for this video. In fact, I got more responses in the commentary as well as email and text, than any other video that I've put out. And I've been really surprised at the number of people that feel that Lizzie Borden was innocent and really took an issue with my video. A lot of people really liked it, and a lot of people felt like that, that she was innocent, and they brought up a lot of topics, and a lot of information about the case. Some of which was a little bit of misinformation, so, a lot of it based on rumor and urban legend that's popped up over time, and things they've seen in documentaries, expressing how that they felt that Lizzie was innocent. They also pointed out a few little mistakes that I made in my video. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to address some of those issues that were brought up and some of the questions that were brought up, as well as clear up a few of those mistakes that I made. So let's get going with that. Now, one of the first things I'd like to address was a few of the minor mistakes that I made in the video. And I can account these mistakes not to lack of knowledge. As I said before, I've been studying this case since I was a kid, but because of another phenomenon I've come to call camera syndrome. Now, anybody out there that has done one of these YouTube videos or any type of video like this, you find that once you get in front of that camera, things that you think you know by heart, that are just really stuck in your mind, when you're staring at that lens, all of a sudden some of it will just go out of your head, and you sit there thinking, it's going through your mind that I don't want to leave dead air or have to start again, so something comes out. And later on you look at it and think, I know better than that. Why did I say that? And there really was the case in that. And I really put this down to me thinking I know this case so well, which I do, and not making notes to look at, cheat notes. For that, not because I don't know the information, but for that very reason. If I go dry and something just, because I'm looking at a camera, flies out of my head, I can look and see. So, I actually learned a lesson with that video, to always write out my notes, even on a subject that I know like the back of my hand. And like tonight, I've got my notes in case there's something that flies away. And that's what it was, because some of the mistakes I made, I'm like, this stuff so well. How the world did you say that? And a few of them, number one was that I noted was when I was talking about Dr. Bowen, I said the name Borden. There's actually a reason for this. I actually know a Dr. Borden, and I think that association, it slipped into my vocabulary. I'm more used to saying Dr. Borden than Dr. Bowen. Dr. Borden rather than Dr. Bowen. So apologies on that one. Another one, and I can't believe I did this one, was the number of blows kept going out of my head. Of all things about the case, I know that as well as I know their names. And even though I did do a correction on it, I thought that I would just state here, for Abby, there was an estimated 18 blows, maybe 19. There was one that hit the back of, actually, the back of her neck rather than the back of her head. All the rest was the back of her head. For Andrew, it was actually 11 blows. So the more savage attack really came on Abby. You know, and if you think about it, to stand over somebody and strike them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 18, that's a lot of rage. And that's a lot. That's not some sort of, attack by some burglar. That is something personal. Same thing with Andrew, to hack his face 11 times. That took a good few seconds. That wasn't something quick. That took several seconds to do. Sit and just swing your arm like an axe 11 times, 18 times, 11 times, and think about it. It's actually a long time. Okay. The other one, and this one really flew out of my head, and I caught it. And there was actually other person online that saw the video that actually mentioned it. And there was a lady that actually lived in the town. And that was the name of the town where Emma moved away and lived. When she had a falling out with Lizzie, she moved away. And I actually named the wrong state. So I actually said she moved to Vermont. Actually, she moved to a town in New Hampshire. So, and I knew that. The other one is that I named, when I talked about when Emma was out of town on the day of the murder, I said that she was in New Haven. Actually, the name of the town is Fairhaven. It's about 15 miles, I think, from the town that they were from. And so, and I think that the reason for that one is that I'm an Ivy League man. I think I was thinking of Yale, which is in New Haven. Go Pitt. So, those are the ones that really kind of stood out. The two names of these towns. So if there was any others, I can't think of any that I said this was not because of lack of knowledge. Like I said, I've studied this for 40 years. It was really because I'm staring at that camera and things can fly out of your head. But, and actually, like I said, because of that video, learned a lesson. Now, another issue that's been brought up to me quite a bit, and that is about the pictures and the positions of the bodies of Abby and Andrew, as is seen famously in these crime photos, some of the first American crime photos. Now, it's been said that the bodies had actually been moved and then replaced. Actually, I've not found evidence of that being true. Now, you got to understand that at the time, modern forensics, the way we know it, didn't exist. People were tracing in and out of that house, moving things, touching things. The idea of preserving the crime scene was still relatively a new thing. So, and we do know that there was some movement of the bodies. For instance, it's likely that Andrew Borden had took his shoes off when he laid on the couch, and it looks like they put his shoes back on. For what reason, for the photo. For what reason, I'm not really sure. Also, I think that Andrew may have actually had his feet up on that couch, and perhaps the first blow, the reflex of the first blow may have caused him to jump, and drop his feet on the floor. I think usually people think he just leaned over and took a nap. That's not really that natural. I mean, some people can do that, but if you're really going to take a nap, you put your feet up on the couch. You took off his shoes and put his feet up on the couch, and for whatever reason, they put his shoes back on. And with Abby, it does look like that she had probably after the initial blow that took her down, which may have been to the back of the neck. When she fell, she may have tried to crawl away from the blows. Under the bed. She was a little bit half under the bed. Was a little bit under the bed, and that for the photo they had pulled her out to take so they could get a good photo. Of course, today they wouldn't do that. They would take the picture in situ. But, and a lot of people says, that could really affect the way we're looking at the crime, as well as my theory about the coat being underneath his head. Actually, in truth, I don't think that the movement of the bodies, is, at least to the point they were talking about, and even if they'd replace them the way that, had moved them completely and then replaced them, which I don't think that happened, I don't think it really affects my theory and what I was saying at all. With Abby, it does not, the fact that she may have tried to crawl under the bed does not really affect the fact that all of the blows were to the back of her head, and there were no defense wounds on her arms, or any sign that she tried before she was struck to get away. It is true when she was struck, probably missed the back of her head. Whoever struck hit the back of her shoulder. She went down. She started to try to crawl away from the attack, which would be something very natural. Of course, she didn't get very far. But that makes a little difference to what it indicates about the crime. The fact that she was on that side of the bed, that she was attacked from behind, and apparently she did not expect it and see it coming. Whoever it was walked around that bed and attacked her, and she went down. Nothing on the tables were broken. If you look on that little buffet table or end table, whatever it is, you'll see the little porcelain figures. Well, they're not disturbed. They haven't been broken. Now, even if at the crime scene they'd set things back up, which is a possibility, at least one of those you would have thought would have been broken. They're not broken. That doesn't look like they've been disturbed at all. So there was no, and there's once again no defense wound. So there was no struggle. She went down. She may try to crawl away, and her attacker just started hacking her head, and that was it. So it really doesn't affect anything. Same thing with Andrew. If they had put, his feet had been up or down, shoes on, shoes off, doesn't stop the fact that he was laying there on that couch, no defense wounds for him either, and the side of his face was hacked away. He's apparently attacked in his sleep. And as far as the coat underneath the head, well, I just see no reason that they would need to stuff a coat under his head that way for the picture. One, and two, if they were going to do that to prop his head somehow, which it's really not, if you look and see, then why didn't they fold the coat up and put it under there? No, it looks like it's been stuffed under from the side. So it really doesn't affect my theory as to that heavy overcoat being in the picture. I think that overcoat was already under that pillow. And like I said, I have, that they actually took the bodies up and then put them back for the photo makes no sense. I can see where they may have messed with the body, but I don't think it was actually completely moved until they did the autopsy later that night. Now, it's true, they had been, by the time they took these pictures, they'd been laying there half the day. Blood had already coagulated and all of that. But I think that they had, other than a few little tweaks, that's pretty much, this is the crime scenes. This is how they were found. Now, another thing that has come up, there's been some theories by some even police and investigators talking about, and I've seen this in a couple of documentaries and even read a few reports about it, where that some people have speculated that Abby had been killed closer to the time of Andrew's death. Abby is believed to have been killed around 9:30 in the morning. This is based on the coagulation of the blood at the crime scene. It looked like she'd been dead about an hour and a half before Andrew got home. Andrew, of course, came home about 20 minutes till 11, best as we can figure out. So Abby would have already been dead over an hour and a half. So, but some couples have speculated that due to the weather, the coolness of the morning, and we're going to talk about weather again in a second, that the temperature had affected how the blood coagulated, and that it may have actually coagulated quicker, therefore giving a false time, and it may have actually happened around 10:30 in the morning rather than 9:30. Actually, the temperature that morning was somewhere in the upper 60s, mid 70s. That's already going to affect the coagulation of blood that much. number one. And also, this theory doesn't make sense that she had been killed later, close to the time of Andrew, because it doesn't match the timeline. Because in the timeline, Lizzie as well as Bridget said that Mrs. Borden said she was going upstairs around 9 o'clock in the morning to put the pillow slips on the bed. And now she is found, after 11 a.m., hacked to death, laying on the back side of that bed where she went to change those pillow slips. Now, someone trying to say that she was killed closer to like 10:30. So, what was she doing? Why was she on that side of the bed? Did she go up there at 9 a.m.? It doesn't take an hour and a half to change some pillow slips. So, by this theory, she went up there, changed the pillow slips, which would take what, 5-10 minutes? And what she do the rest of that hour and a half? Stand and just stare at the wall? It doesn't make sense. It looks like that time of death was correct. That she went up there to change those pillow slips at 9 a.m. and she was attacked some between 9 a.m. 9:30. So, somewhere in that time period, which would make sense. That would make sense as to why they found her on that side of the bed where she went to change those pillow slips, like the testimony said. So, and another theory that goes with that was like, well, this would have been a robbery. Somebody, because if you get the crimes close together, you have a little more justification, not much, for it being a robbery gone wrong. But that doesn't make sense on a lot of levels. Think about it. Let's just go deductive reasoning here and logic. Someone breaks in the house to rob the house, and while they're there, they don't attack. They hide in the house and they attack a woman, kill her, don't steal anything, wait an hour and a half, and then go downstairs, creep downstairs with people at home in the middle of the day. Remember, this is like 11 o'clock in the morning, between 9 and 11 o'clock in the morning, and kill the father and then flee without taking anything. What kind of robbery and burglary is this? It makes no sense. So I think, so not only does it not make sense as to the timeline, her being killed closer to the time of Andrew, but also, because she's on that side of the bed, but also the whole break-in for a robbery gone bad, the whole scenario, and the timeline, it's a ridiculous theory, and it really doesn't hold any water. Now, another issue that would possibly affect my theory about the coat being out, this heavy overcoat being out in a hot day in August, is the recent discovery that actually, looking back at the weather predictions, at the weather reports for that day, it was actually at that time of the morning, according to the weather reports, it wasn't that hot yet. It was somewhere between the upper 60s to the mid 70s, rather than the upper 90s, which has always been reported. And actually, during the trial, it was used by the prosecution, talked about the heavy heat. All through the trial, they bring up the heat. And it's been speculated by at least one author, whom I won't name, that the prosecution was trying to make people remember that it was a hot day when it really wasn't, because it worked for their case. Now, and I've seen this weather report that it was, somewhere in the 70s. However, I don't buy it, and I'll tell you why. Number one, you got to understand, this happened during a time before cell phones. This happened in a time before television, before even radio. People had very little entertainment, other than like board games and parlor games, that type of things. So people had less things to do. Therefore, so when something happened, they paid much more attention. And the murder of the Bordens was a huge event in Fall River. In fact, over 2,000 people flocked around the house within an hour or so of the crime. This was a huge incident in their lives. Things like this just did not normally happen on a regular basis, this type of murder. And the fact that during the trial they talked about how hot it was that day. Just like 9/11, or the day Elvis died, or the day John Lennon was shot, or the day Kennedy was shot. You ask anybody that lived through those periods and ask them, what was the weather like that day? They'll tell you. Or what was you doing at that time? Everybody knows what they were doing when Kennedy was shot, if you were alive then, or what you were doing during 9/11 if you were old enough at that point. And the fact that these people had less distractions means that they're going to remember that day very well. So if the prosecution had stood up and said, "Oh, it was a 90-degree day. It was super hot," when it wasn't hot, people were like, "What is he talking about? I remember that day. It was fairly cool that day." So I don't buy that it was a cool. At least to the feel of the skin, that it was a cool day. The thing is, though, is that I think that the temperature was probably right, but they're not counting in the humidity. And anyone that's been in the hot part of the summer, especially on the East Coast, and that is near water, the humidity, even, when you've got a hot summer and the ground's already hot from the summer, that humidity can make 70 feel like 90. We've all experienced this. So even though the temperature for that morning, people may have said, "Oh, it was not that hot," it probably felt much hotter because of that high humidity from the days before. And by that evening, it would have been hot. It would have been an upper 90s. So I believe that it was a very hot day, and also because of that humidity, the theory that he would have wore this overcoat because it's cooler that morning doesn't hold up. It was a very humid day. It was going to be a very hot day, and there'd be no reason he would have this winter coat out, this heavy overcoat, when he's already wearing a 3-piece suit. So once again, that coat is out of place. That coat in that organized house would have been put away in some hope chest, or they did have a closet. That would have been put away. So my theory as to why that, is pointing out that coat is present, still holds up in my opinion. And this whole thing about the temperature that was reported, I'm not saying that they made a mistake at the weather station. I'm sure that was right. It's not counting in that sticky humidity that we all know in August. Now, the number one statement that I heard from people defending Lizzie in the comments was, "Well, I don't see why it couldn't have been a business associate of Andrew Borden. He had business enemies. Why couldn't it have been one of them that broke in and killed the Bordens?" Well, and that was speculated even at the time. However, police did investigate. That was the first thing that they popped on, was that, hey, that this could be some business thing go wrong. In fact, it was even reported, or at least rumored, that Andrew had an argument with one of his tenants, or with an unknown man, like a couple of days before. However, when the police investigated, they could find no one that had that kind of a beef with Andrew Borden, number one. Number two, let's also remember these crimes took place on a busy business day at about between 9 and 11 o'clock. And a lot of his business associates, and even people that may have had a beef with him over rent, they were at work. They weren't off. They had alibis. Those were checked. Those were one of the first ones checked, because nobody really wanted to accuse Lizzie of it at the time. The thought that a woman could do this was just unheard of. They kept trying to find someone. Everyone had alibis. Every one of his business associates were either at work, or they were out of town. They found absolutely no basis for it of anyone that had that kind of beef with him, number one, and everyone of his business associates that's known of had an alibi. Why? It was the middle of a work day. Early in the morning, people were at work. So that really goes out the window, and there's no evidence for it either. And also, let's bring up once again that, let's say that, for benefit of argument, that this was a business associate that was ticked off at being kicked out of his house or something that he was renting from Andrew, and he decides, I'm going to go kill him. Well, that makes no sense any more than the robbery theory, because, okay, once again, so you're going to go kill your landlord. You sneak into the house. One thing, you don't wait in the middle of the night and go kill him in his bed. You don't catch him out somewhere and kill him. No, I'm going to break in his house at 9 o'clock in the morning, or before 9 o'clock in the morning, on a busy day, busy hot day, people walking everywhere. Remember, there are no cars. The pace was much slower. People were on foot or in buggies. So whipping traffic guy, people, and there was less distractions. Once again, no TV, no radios, no cell phones or smartphones. So people would have paid a lot more attention, and somebody would have noticed this. And this is in a very busy part, of the downtown of Fall River. So it's not so easy for somebody to be sneaking in at that time of a bright summer day. But now, say that they did get in the house. So they get in the house at 9 o'clock in the morning. They hide and they attack and kill his wife. And not only do they attack and kill his wife, apparently she doesn't seem concerned when this person comes through either the door, but she's on the other side of the bed, as I described before. She is on the other side of the bed, making the bed. There's a door directly in front of her and a door here to the side. So she had to see the person coming toward her from this door or from this side, and then had to come through the door, walk all the way around the bed to the back of her. And she did not seem to be frightened of whoever this person was. She had to have seen them, and she was not frightened, and they didn't seem to be out of place because there's no defense room. She didn't scream. She didn't try to run. And it would be practically impossible that she did not see this person. No, whoever she saw, as I said before, was someone she knew, and she expected them to be there, and she did not have any qualms or any fears about turning her back to them as she was making this bed. There was only one person in the house at the time, and that was Lizzie Borden. Bridget the maid was outside. So he attacks and kills her for whatever reason, and not the landlord. He's out. So what do you do? He hides in the house. Where, I don't know. There's that house are all doors that lead one room into the other. There's not a lot of closet space or places to hide. But he waits for an hour and a half for the landlord to come home. Then with two other people in the house, his daughter downstairs with him, he goes down and he hacks him to death and then flees. Not seen by anyone. This doesn't make any sense. That's not the way someone attacking their landlord would do it. They would attack him on the street. They'd catch him out at night somewhere. Or if they were going to do it in the house, they're going to sneak in the house at night like a prowler and kill him. You don't go in at 9 o'clock in the morning and wait in the house, kill his wife, wait in the house an hour and a half, then kill him when he comes home with everybody at home in the middle of the day. It makes no sense. So this, from either way, there were alibis for the people that were his tenants, as well as his business associates, which had no qualm with him. And the whole scenario of one of these people breaking the house and killing in this manner, it doesn't fit that type of MO of a rage killing or a revenge killing. It just doesn't make sense. So I think we can rule this completely out. Now, one of the last ones that have been brought up to me on a couple of occasions was this story that Lizzie, on her deathbed, had confessed to her nurse that she had got a boyfriend that her boyfriend at the time, whom her father didn't approve of, had killed her parents. And now there is some basis of fact to this, in fact, but this story also falls apart. There was a nurse who took care of Lizzie for a little while after her gallbladder surgery in 1927, same year she died, named Ruby Cameron. And Ruby Cameron claimed that Lizzie had told her this, that she had told her that she had a boyfriend her father didn't like, and that he had she had let him in the house, he'd hid in the barn, she let him in the house, he killed the stepmother, and then hid and waited, and killed the father. And then she helped him sneak out back to his house. Okay, there's a lot of problems here. Number one, there is no evidence and no testimony that Lizzie Borden ever had a known boyfriend at the time or even before. Once again, about Fall River. Once again, a few distractions: no TV, no radio, none of that. They're just so. And also, people love to talking, and rumor mills and gossip is big in any town. But from things I've read about Fall River, they were the champions at it. Everybody was in everybody's business. A lot of busybodies and window watchers. Everybody wanted to know what everything's going on. That town thrived on gossip, and rumors. And the fact that if Lizzie Borden had a boyfriend, there's no way in that town she was going to hide it. So because she was a Borden, she was and all that, that was not going to be hid. There's no evidence she had ever had a boyfriend, neither before nor after the murders. Now, so if she did have this boyfriend, what's the plot here? That he comes in, he kills her parents, and then he disappears? Because there's no, she never ends up with him. He never moves in. She never gets married. He just, he's like, hey, I'll come kill him for you, and then I'm out of here. That don't make any sense. What kind of crime of passion and money is that? She becomes rich, and he never comes back for his share. Because once again, a guy sneaking around, especially in the society heel of Fall River, would have been noticed, and the rumors would have been flying instantly. There's no way that she had a lover all that time. So this makes no sense. What kind of half-ass murder for money and love is this? That falls apart. Also, Ruby Cameron herself, was a nurse. It does appear she did take care of Lizzie that time. But reporters at the time did not, felt that she was kind of full of beans. Number one, she did not report this, and this happened in 1927. She did not report this to the press, and she called the press for this, until 1985, 60 years later. 60 years. Why didn't she tell this before? Why now? Why when she was a very elderly woman? That's, at that point it becomes hearsay and there's no way to prove what she was saying. That's number one. Number two, the reporters also found that she made claims that they know were not true. She claimed to have a PhD, I think it was in biochemistry, and she named the university. They checked the university. There's no record of her ever being there. She claimed to have written 3 published books. Library of Congress shows there is no published books from her. So apparently she told some rather tall tales. Now, whether this was because of her advanced age, we don't know. She also claimed that she had met Golda Meir, the Prime Minister of Israel, and they had asked her to start a nursing clinic in Israel. There's, of course, no record of this either. So it does seem that her credibility or ability to tell tall tales, that's not helping her with what she said about Lizzie. However, benefit of the doubt, I do think it's very possible that Lizzie did tell her that. But once again, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit the timeline. It doesn't fit the circumstances surrounding the case. Like I said, number one, where did this guy go, and where did he run off to, and who was this guy? Now, Ruby Cameron said that it was a man named David Anthony, who did live about a mile away, who was about 10 years younger than Lizzie, but there's no evidence of any relationship between them whatsoever. It was never brought up during his lifetime. The man died, and also she got how he died wrong. She said he died from I think it was from the flu epidemic in 1917. He actually died in a motorcycle accident much later. So she's getting a lot of facts there wrong, and it doesn't seem to be any connection. And also, remember that whoever killed the Bordens had to flee that house in broad daylight, 11 o'clock in the morning, would have been covered in blood. Nobody saw a thing. Nobody reported seeing a man covered in blood running from that house at the time. Now, there's been rumors and urban legends. Oh, someone said they saw it and they didn't report it. That's, when the stories that come up like that, the police were checking for that very thing. Found nothing at the time. Nobody reported this. It was like 30, 40 years later, people saying, well, I heard that so-and-so saw somebody come to that house. You can disregard that. Police were all over that. They were looking for that. That's one. Two, him running out of that house and not being seen was practically impossible. And a good evidence for that is that, okay, right after the murders, within a few minutes of the murder, from what we can tell, around 11:05, Lizzie sent Bridget out of the house to run over to Dr. Bowen's house, who was next door. And she was immediately noticed by the neighbors. Adelaide Churchill, one of the neighbors, saw it and actually went over to the house. And she wasn't the only one. The minute that Bridget run out of that house somewhere else, the neighbors all noticed it. But they didn't notice a man covered in blood running out of the house, 5 or 6 minutes earlier? This just does not fit. However, I think it may give a little clue if she was telling the truth as to Lizzie's mind. It's not uncommon for murderers, even when they're in prison, to come up with fantastical stories as to their own innocence. And it's, no matter how ridiculous it is. And I think that they even come to believe themselves, because patricide is a very serious crime and psychologically very damaging. It's very difficult to kill one's father, especially in the violent way that he was done. And this may have been her way of coping with it. She may have even convinced herself that she didn't do it. This is a coping mechanism. And that's not uncommon with killers or people that kill their parents. They'll come up with some story as how they were innocent and even kind of come to believe it themselves. And so if she did tell her this, I think it's more evidence to Lizzie's mind and how she handled her guilt rather than pointing to her not being guilty. But this evidence, this hearsay, comes 60 years later from this very unreliable source. It pretty much has to be discounted. And also, it makes no sense from any direction you go. So here in conclusion, let me just once again say, having gone over these questions and these urban legends and these rumors and these other theories, it still comes back to the same thing, as it has done since I started studying this case 40 years ago. And when I came into this, I want to say this, I had no preconception on this. I can say that. When I came into this as a young boy, I really didn't know if she did it or not. I had no presupposition about it. I had no theory about it or personal feelings about it. I didn't know if she had done it or not. And that was part of the fun of it in a way for me, was to sit and figure out whether I thought she did it or not. And I was completely neutral, I swear. And once again, even after looking at all these new theories, and the old theories and these speculations about the crime scene and about seeing people run from the house and boyfriends and all of that, it still comes down, when I look at what circumstantial evidence there is, when I look at the timeline, when I look at her testimony, when and I look at the entire crime itself, it always come back to one person, and that's Lizzie Borden. Once again, she was the only person in the house that had a motive. She had the means, and she had the opportunity. She was the only person alone with her parents, both of them, at the time of their murders. At the time Abby was killed, Bridget was outside, plenty of witnesses saw it. She was the only person in the house. When her father come home, Bridget saw Mr. Borden come home, went upstairs, and he and Lizzie was alone. And within a few minutes, within 15 to 20 minutes, he's dead. She stood to become a very wealthy woman from these murders, and also, the fact that the order of the murders. That's something else I didn't go into. By the law, if Edward had been killed before Abby, then that would have meant that that Abby's family could have inherited that inheritance argument, because they could have said that Andrew was dead while Abby was still alive, so she automatically become his heir, and then she was killed. Well, that would mean that her family would have a claim once she was dead, because she had inherited maybe an hour before. She become the heir, she become the owner. Then an hour later she's killed. Well, that means her relatives could have made a claim to the Borden fortune. But with Abby killed first, and then Andrew, it goes to the daughters. So even the order of the murders worked for Lizzie and her sister. Her sister obviously was out of town in Fairhaven, or 15, 20 miles away at the time. Plenty witnesses, not even a speculation on that. The fact that, she was, her testimony, even though she'd been under the influence of morphine at the time, she kept contradicting herself. And interesting, people say, well, it was maybe drug induced. If you read the transcripts, which I have, she's very coherent to the parts where he catches her in a contradiction. Then suddenly she's confused. So I don't really buy that this morphine fog was the reason, because if so, that morphine fog was very selective at the times that he caught her in a mistake. Yeah, I don't think that she ever thought that they would think she'd do it. She was a woman, a Victorian woman, and a Borden, a wealthy woman. They would have assumed, I think she had it in her mind that they would automatically assume this was done by a man, by a burglar, or some enemy of her father. She would never even be suspected. I think that's what she had in her mind. So I don't think she was prepared when she got at that death inquest, when Norton went after her. I don't think that she was prepared to answer those questions. I don't think she ever thought it'd get that far, and that's what caught her off guard. So, but once again, it always comes back to her. Her excuse talks about a note coming. There was no note. The fact that she had actually probably been on the stairs at the time with her mother with an eye line of her. And the whole thing about that her mother, like I talked about with the bed, her mother's on the other side of the bed. She had to see who was coming in at her, either from one way, walk around the end of the bed, like I said, and whoever it was somebody she trusted, she expected to be in the house, was not surprised, and did not mind them being behind her. And Lizzie was the only person in the house at the time. So once again, it always comes back to Lizzie. Lizzie Borden killed her parents. And the fact that, and now I will say that the trial was right. They tried her on the burnt dress. The burnt dress was easily thrown out. There was no other evidence they could point at the time. I think today with forensics, they'd probably hang her, and they kicked out her testimony. So the verdict was correct. But simply because the verdict was correct, that doesn't mean that she was innocent. That means that they didn't have the evidence, they didn't have the ability to get the evidence to convict her, and also it was a bad a bad move from the prosecution, a bad case from the prosecution. They made a weak case. So even if you did that trial on what was given at the time, you'd have to find her innocent. But that's because it was based on something very flimsy at the time. But now I will say this in closing, one more thing. For all those out there that think Lizzie didn't do it, true, there is no evidence, direct evidence. We don't have fingerprints or blood, all of that. But I put this to you. Let's say, for the benefit of the doubt, yes, Lizzie is innocent. Okay? All right. She's innocent. So put yourself in her place. You're an innocent. You didn't kill your father. Your father comes home at 20 minutes till 11. The maid says, I'm going to go take a nap. Okay, you go take a nap. The father said, I'm going to lay down too until lunch. He goes and lays down. Now it's probably around, like I said, going on 15 minutes till 11. You go wherever the hell it is that you went, out to the barn to find sinkers on a hot day, in the barn that the dust was never disturbed. You're eating pears in the backyard, whatever it is you're doing for that 15 minutes. And then you come back in the house. You walk into the parlor and you find your father, who you just saw 15 minutes ago, alive and well, laying on his couch with his head hacked in, blood still dripping, fresh kill. You know he was alive 15 minutes before. You found him dead. What would you do? What would be your reaction? What would be anyone's reaction? Do you know that? Would you have any idea? What would you think? You find this. What would you think? If you have nothing to do with it. My God, he's just been killed. There's a killer in the damned house. That's the first thing you're going to think. Is this killer still in the house? He's just been killed. He was alive 15 minutes ago. He's dead now. If you don't know anything about it, how do you know that killer's not still in the damned house? And what would you do? You're going to run the hell out of that house. You first found your father hacked to death. He was alive 15 minutes ago. He's bleeding. He's dead and bleeding on the floor. You would run out of that house screaming bloody murder, literally bloody murder. That would be the normal response. But instead, what did Lizzie do? She called upstairs to the maid, said, "Maggie, come quick. Father's dead. Someone's broke in and killed him." Well, one, how do you know he didn't go upstairs and kill Maggie? How do you know she's not alive? How do you know he's not in the house? And then, now it's true that sometimes people in shock can do some very irrational things. I know of a case where a person came in and found some robbers in their house, and this woman got so paranoid she actually ran to them, like, "Oh God, no!" and run right to them. People will do things like that, and I'll give that benefit of the doubt. But I would think that self-preservation, when you're looking at a dead, bleeding body, would kick in. You may go into shock, but also self-preservation is going to kick in, and you're going to run the hell out of that house in a panic. I think panic would override the shock. But what did Lizzie do? Did she run out of the house? No. She called to the maid. She told the maid to go across the street and get the doctor. And she stayed in the house. We have testimony for that, because when Adelaide Churchill, the neighbor, saw Bridget running across the street, she looked and she said in her testimony she saw Lizzie standing inside the screen door still in the house. Who stays in a house with their father just been hacked to death? It's almost as though she knew she was in no danger. There was no threat. She just stood there. Someone's killed my father. Sent the maid across the street to get the doctor. Still standing in the house. How did she know that the person that killed her father wasn't there? There's really only one explanation. Because the person that killed her father was still in the house and standing in the screen door. I don't see any other way around that. Who stays in the house? If your father was alive 15 minutes ago, I found him dead and bleeding, and I stayed in the house and waited for people to come. Think about that when you think about the innocence of Lizzie Borden. Well, okay, folks, that's all I've got. Really all I've got on Lizzie Borden, the case of Lizzie Borden. I think with all of the speculations and all the theories and all of the different rumors and the new thing, I think that it all, when you boil it down, still comes down to one thing. Lizzie Borden killed her parents in 1892, and she got away with it. So, you know what? If you are enjoying these videos, please hit this little King Henry head and give me a like, and as well as give me a joy. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I'd love to have you on board. My channel is actually growing quite a bit, and you know, I would love to have you on board. I love hearing from my subscribers and my fans. And once again, this type of videos are really these type of topics are really my passion. As I said before, you know, pursue your passions in life and get passionate, as I do, about them. That's what life's all about. And while you do, you stay pretty.